Hello everybody! Yes, I'm actually making a video. This is probably the biggest surprise you received all day. But I figured I have a little time, and with all of the cards from Naxxramas being released at this point, I figured, I'm a little late because some people have done their review already, but I kind of wanted to wait until I've had a chance to play with all the cards, because sometimes cards on paper look a little better than they do in person, or vice versa. Maybe a card looks terrible, then you play with it and you're like, wait, this is actually good. So I'm just going to go right through the cards, starting with the class cards and then going to the neutral cards, and just talk about, do I like the card, do I hate the card, does it have maybe some cool gimmicky uses I can tell you guys about, and then I'll probably give it some arbitrary number rating that doesn't really matter too much, but I'm still going to do it because it just feels like I have to at this point. So let's start off with the Druid. The Druid, the first card we're looking at here is the Druid card of Poison Seeds. Poison Seeds is a 4-drop with the effect destroy all minions and summon 2/2 Trents to replace them. My opinions on this card. I mean, Poison Seeds, I tried it when it first came out, and I think it has uses, and I don't think it's a card that will never see play. I just don't think right now is the time for it to see play. To me, it feels like a card that could be very good down the line. Like, after more expansion sets come out, there might be some cards that just make this card better by itself, right? But right now, like, the only real combos you can do with Poison Seeds is Poison Seed Starfall, and that's a 9-drop combo. And if you're playing Druid, in most cases, your 9-drop is either some sort of big ramp play, or you're doing Force of Nature, Savage Roar. You don't want to stack your deck with tons of these 9-drop combos, because even as Druid, it can be challenging sometimes against aggro decks to get there, and this card absolutely sucks against aggro decks. It's board clear, but you still leave them with 2 damage for every minion on the field, and they're going to get that chance to attack first. Poison Seed's definitely one of my least favorite of the new class cards, and at the current time, I'd give it probably about a 3. Only reason I'm not going even lower than that is because, again, it has its uses, very specific uses. If you're in a tournament that lets sideboarding, like, it could be useful in specific matchups. I could see it being useful against Control Warrior, just because Control Warrior has a lot of big creatures, and you can, Druid doesn't have very many ways to deal with things like Ragnaros and Baron and Ysera and Grom. Like, they just have all these legendaries, these big creatures that are just hard to deal with as Druid. So this does have a use, but it's such a limited use that I don't see it being used in very many decks. Let's move on to the Hunter card, one that's been seeing a lot of play with a lot of the Hunter decks going on right now. Web Spinner. It's a 1-drop, 1/1 beast that has the effect of Death Rattle, add a random beast card to your hand. This card is fun, and that's what I like most about it. It's just straight up a fun card. It's low drop, which is something that's nice for both kill command plays and for getting just an easy draw off of a buzzard. But its Death Rattle effect has led to some of the most hilarious moments I've had. Like, just having your Web Spinner killed and then getting, like, the one beast, like, getting a Kodo where your opponent has, like, a Baron Rivendare on the field and you really need to clear that because you know they're going to do some combos with it. And even to the more silly where it's like, I got a Core Hound off a Web Spinner that died on turn 6, so suddenly I had a turn 7 play that I didn't have, and because my opponent's board wasn't the strongest, I was able to clear most of it and just have a 9/5 on the field. I lost a game, earlier today in fact, to a Core Hound, because it may not be the best card to just put in your deck, but when you get one just as a bonus off of Web Spinner, you can find these situations where you're like, he can't do anything to deal with a Core Hound. I'm going to play a Core Hound. And it can do some damage. I've had a lot of games where I get Mukla off of it. I've had games where I get Pirate's, Parrot. Captain's Parrot. It's definitely not the best card to get off of it, but I think it's just looking at the list of beasts. So many of the beasts that you can get are useful. There's like 3 beasts on the entire list, Captain's Pair being one of them, that I'd go, ugh, I hate seeing that. The rest I'm like, it's a 1-drop beast. I can use that the same way I'd use Web Spam for triggering a kill command, or even with like I get the Wind Fury Dragonhawk, and it's just like, you know, I'm probably not going to do anything amazing with this guy, but I can play him and give him taunt with my Houndmaster, and then suddenly have 6 damage to the face. Like, that's a potential combo. That's a potential thing that could happen. And I really like Web Spammer because it opens up these moments where you just end up with a card you would never think to use and go, hey, this is good in this situation. Personally, I give Web Spinner a I'm going to give it the arbitrary number of a 7. I just like the number 7. I feel like 7 fits it. It's not game-breaking. It's not, this card will win you the game. But it's really cool, and it's good enough for its, like, just being a 1/1/1 beast that you're going to see in Hunter's deck. And as a result, the Death Rattle effect ends up just happening. And it's really cool. Next up is the Mage. Duplicate. 3-drop secret with when a friendly minion dies, put 2 copies of it into your hand. So again, got a little chance to play around with Duplicate, and my general thoughts on Duplicate are simply that it's a good card in, again, specific situations. I think it'll have its uses, but the major thing that hurts Duplicate is the fact that secrets were changed to only activate on your opponent's turn. You know, it'd be so much a better card if you could do, like, play Leroy, crash Leroy, still have 2 Leroy in hand. You can still do silly things like that by just simply playing Leroy, having Duplicate set up, and go, I dare you to kill Leroy. Because your opponent's going to want to kill that Leroy, but at the same time, they're like, if I kill that Leroy, he's going to have 2 Leroys. So you can do things with it. I just don't think it fits very well in many decks right now in the Mage arsenal. I've tried it in Secret Mage. I think, you know, you can run a copy, but I don't think it's a huge game changer as some of the other Naxx cards were. It gives them the ability to have, you know, 4 of a card, which is, or potentially 6 of a card, which is interesting, and maybe in the future we'll see, like, again, this is a card I think will get better as time goes on, because you might get these better creatures that you just want 2 copies, more copies of, and so Duplicate can help facilitate that want to have 4 of a creature rather than running 2 of a creature. At the current time, however, I'm just going to simply give Duplicate a 5. I think it's definitely better than Poison Seed. It actually is seen play in some decks, and rightfully so, because, you know, it can be scary when you have 4 water elementals. Like, those things can be hard to deal with through some decks, and so it has its purposes. And I just don't think it's one of the best cards out next. They're certainly better, in my opinion. Moving on to Paladin, we have Avenge, a 1-drop secret with when one of your minions dies, give a random friendly minion +3/+2. I really like this card. I know a lot of people look at Revenge and go, this is a terrible card, but I think Secret Paladin has plenty of chances to really shine with this card. A great little turn 1 play is turn 1 play a Secret Keeper, and turn 2 play Avenge and defend, and God, I can't think of the name right now, the Defender card, the Noble Sacrifice, there we go. You play Noble Sacrifice and Avenge at the same time, and now that 1/2 would now be up to a 3/4, because you played 2 secrets, and if they try to attack the 3/4, it will then summon the get down! It will die, and you get +3/+2 on this thing, making it a 6/6. This is on turn 3. That's disgusting. Granted, it's a Christmas, Miracle Christmas Land kind of situation. To get all three of those cards in your opening hand, you know, it's not very likely, but still a very potent little combo there. And one of the other cards in Naxxramas I'll be getting to, Mad Scientist, definitely helps this card see the light of day because it just pulls it straight from your deck. I definitely give Avenge a higher grade than I think a lot of people were giving it before it came out, because I think in many cases, especially when combined with like Ooze and just general buff decks, it can be a strong card. I would say it's a 6 for me. If I was to give it an arbitrary number, it's going to be the number 6. That's just my arbitrary number for Avenge. Moving on to Priest. Priest got Dark Cultist. A 3-drop, 3/4 with Death Rattle, give a random friendly minion +3 health. This card is good. That's it. It's good. And here's the thing with Dark Cultist. It's like a Yeti. It's a good card, but there's nothing special to say about it. It's not like a Web Spinner. It's a good card that then does something. It's an interesting card, right? Web Spinner is an interesting card. Dark Cultist is a good card. Like, you can't say anything bad about Dark Cultist. A 3/4 for 3 that also gives another friendly minion +3 health when it dies. That's really good. But it doesn't do anything special, but it will potentially put you in a advantageous position as a Priest player. Facing Dark Cultist and playing with Dark Cultist, you put your opponent into the situation when you play Dark Cultist and you have other minions on the field. Well, they're going to want to try their best, if they can, to clear the other minions before they kill the Dark Cultist. They don't want Dark Cultist to die while you have other things, because then Dark Cultist gets additional value. It's already a 3/4 for 3, which is really good stats. But then it also gives 3 additional health to something. There's not much to say about Dark Cultist. You know, it's a good card. It's a Yeti of the 3-drops. It is the 3-drop equivalent of a Yeti when it comes to stats, and it has a good Death Rattle effect that could combo in specific situations with, say, a Light Spawn, or if you're running a Inner Fire deck. But it's nothing. It's almost uncontrollable to the point, like, your opponent gets to really decide when it dies, and it wouldn't be that useful, in my opinion, to Shadow Word that paying your own Dark Cultist just to buff a creature. I think you'd rather have Dark Cultist die and your opponent have to worry about that +3. It does more good as a I'm here, deal with me, than a I'm here, I dealt with myself. Right? I'm going to give Dark Cultist a 7 for my arbitrary number. It's a good card. A lot like Web Spinner, it's a good card. It's going to be played in every Priest deck. And, however, unlike Web Spinner, it doesn't have that quirkiness that Web Spinner does. It's just flat good. So I might even bring it up to an 8 in some situations. I figure I'd point out now, I am speaking of Constructed mostly. A lot of these cards have different uses in Arena. However, I am not very much of an Arena player, and I don't feel confident enough to really talk about how a card would look in Arena, which is why I'm just specifically talking about Constructed. Moving on to Rogue, we have 4-drop, 5/5, a Nubar Ambusher, Death Rattle, return a random friendly minion to your hand. So, this card is interesting. I made a Rogue deck. It's right over here, actually. Here's Your Deck, I called it, because it was basically a mill deck. But the thing with Ambusher is that in the right situation, Ambusher can be very strong. I had a game where my turn 3 play was Dancing Swords, my turn 4 play was Ambusher, my turn 5 play was Loatheb. My opponent could not, even though I had all these creatures that had like a negative death rattle that hurt me, Like, my opponent couldn't deal with them because they just were so beefy, such beefy creatures that I just kept nailing him for 5, 5, 4, 5, like these big numbers. And I think there is some potential in a mid-range control deck that uses Ambusher as a body. Its death rattle is definitely painful for tempo because you're going to lose a minion. It's saying you're going to have to cast a minion twice, which can be really bad. Even if it is a minion that has a battle cry effect, you still tend not to want to have to play it again at full price. That's why you run Shadow Step, because, well, I'll play it again, but it'll cost me, 2 less. It definitely has potential. I don't think it's as bad as people have said. I think it can work. However, I will say it's definitely not the best card. I'd say I'd put this card around a 4 or 5 as an arbitrary number. Again, these numbers mean pretty much nothing. I'm literally making them up as I speak. But those are basically my thoughts on Ambusher. A good card until he dies. And when he dies, you immediately regret playing him if you have anything else on the field. Let's go to Shaman. Reincarnate. 2-drop. Destroy a minion, then return it to life with full health. This right here is one of my favorite Naxx cards. I've been playing a lot of Shaman since all the Naxx cards got released, and Reincarnate just lets you do stupid things. It is a card that has practical uses, impractical uses, and then there are just those moments in between where you just do something so ridiculous that it deserves a print screen button, because you just want to show someone. Because you want to go, it's a really awkward problem to have when your board is nothing but Bloodhoof. When your entire board are just Karen and Banes. It's so awkward. Like, Reincarnate lets you do so many really silly plays. Reincarnate for Shaman, combined with Sylvanas, gives you an 8-drop, basically a 2-card 8-drop combo that gives you a 5/5 on the field, plus a random enemy minion. That's good, right? Like, I'm not just a little crazy here. That's really good. And the fact that you also have cards like Ancestral Spirit that you can combine with this means you can do even more ridiculous things. Here's a simple little combo that I've pulled off more times than you would think. Karen, Ancestral Spirit, Reincarnate. It's a turn 10 play where you now have 3 Karen and 2 Bane on the field. Your opponent, in most cases, will be really confused what the hell to do, because you have so many Yetis worth of bodies, basically, on the field, and Yetis are awkward to destroy. They are 4 attacks, so priests don't really have much to do. They all are, 3 of them are Karen, so they're going to just bring out another Bane when they die anyways. And you look at a lot of generic removal, it's stuff like Big Game Hunter. It doesn't have 7 attack, it has 4 attack. It's cards like Black Knight, and this isn't a taunter. It can't be Black Knight, unlike Earth Elemental, which is still a great card in Shaman in my opinion. But that's another story. Reincarnate just gives you all of these combos. Reincarnate Leroy. Although I tend not to win my games as Shaman with that combo, because I'm usually using my Reincarnates for bigger plays, things like the Karen plays, things like the Sylvanas plays, using it with Kel'Thuzad, another new card I'll be talking about. If you Reincarnate is a Shadow Step. You bring out Leroy, you Reincarnate him, he comes back, he can attack again, and you combine, and it doesn't even give your opponent another 2 whelps. It's really strong for that situation, especially since Shaman's a deck with things like Flame Tongue Totem. You have Flame Tongue Totem on the field, and you go off with Leroy, Reincarnate, like, that's 8 damage. It's basically the equivalent of hitting him with 4 Leroy in 1 turn worth of damage. Just from Leroy, it doesn't even count if you have other creatures on the field that can get through. Like, it can be a huge burst combo. And while some people did try to make like a Miracle Shaman, I could never get one fully work. I mean, Lower Theb definitely hurts Miracle style decks nowadays, just because he really goes, hey, you run mostly spells. Sucks to be you this turn. But I think Reincarnate, a lot of people look at as a gimmicky card, but it's, in my opinion, it's in the same boat as Circle of Healing. It's a card that looks gimmicky and does gimmicky things, but when you have multiple gimmicks that one single card can pull off, it then becomes less gimmicky and, in my opinion, more just consistent. You know, Circle of Healing is ran because you can do Circle of Healing Circle of Healing Arcani Soul Priest, you can do Circle of Healing Injured Blade Master, you can do Circle of Healing while you have Pyromancer and a Northshire Cleric on the field for a little bit of a draw and heal combo, and again, it works as a really cheap trigger, 0-drop for Wild Pyromancer. Like, that's why Circle of Healing is ran. It has so many combos. It's a dead card on its own, but it has so many combos that works. Reincarnate, in my opinion, is even better than that, because not only do you have a lot of combos, Karen's a great target, Sylvanas is a great target, Leroy is obviously a great target, Kel'Thuzad's a great target, but you also have the little things you can do with it. I play an Earth Elemental and my opponent silences Earth Elemental. Cool, I can reincarnate that Earth Elemental and basically unsilence it and bring it back to a 7/8. I can use Reincarnate on an enemy's minion that's buffed up to unbuff them. It's obviously not the best use of Reincarnate considering all the other things you can do with him, but if you're in a situation where it's, okay, either he loses damage or I die, it has that functionality. And just because of how many things you can do with Reincarnate, again, I don't think it's a gimmicky card. I think it's a solid card that has a lot of potential depending on the deck you're running. If you're running the Leroy, if you're running the Sylvanas, if you're running the Karen, if you're like me and you're running kind of the Crusher variant, you know, a little throwback to the old Crusher variant, and running things like Earth Elemental, Reincarnate is a good card. I definitely say it's my first 10 of the set, hands down. Such a good card, and really, really, really fun. It's that perfect balance of, it lets me do fun, silly things, but those fun, silly things aren't actually just terrible. They can be really strong. So, with that, let's move on to the Warlock card. Voidcaller, a 4-drop 3/4 with Death Rattle. Put a random demon from your hand into the battlefield. Voidcaller can do silly things. I think it's a good card, in my opinion. Again, it kind of falls under the same category as the Priest card in the sense that it's a good card and it can do silly things. So it's probably a little bit more like Webspin in that sense than Dark Cultist. However, my main problem with Voidcaller is it kind of exists for a deck that doesn't really exist. It's really good in Demon decks, but the problem is Demon decks don't really exist. I really like that the hybrid we've been seeing, that kind of the Zoo Handlock hybrid we've been seeing with Voidcaller. And I think it can be a very fun deck to play because you have a Voidcaller gets Void Terrored, and now you also have a Jiraxis on the field. Like, when you have a 3/15 on the field, and you, like, Defender of Argus it, now it's a 4/16, you're up against a Priest. That Priest pretty much just loses. Like, how do they deal with a 16 health 4-attack creature? That is so hard for someone like a Priest to deal with. Even other classes can have trouble with it. You know, I think it feels good. It's a card that feels good. It lets you do things like suddenly a Jiraxis on the field, or, oh, I just have a Doomlord that I didn't have to pay for. It gives you these fun feeling plays. However, I don't think I think it is starting to fall into that category of putting Poison Seed and Duplicate in of it will be better as Hearthstone grows. The more demons there are, the better this card is, flat out. This card basically means whenever a new big demon comes out, he has a new play buddy. He has a new, ooh, I can Void Collar this guy and for free. Like, that is where Void Collar definitely comes into play. I think he has uses right now, but he'll get more uses as Hearthstone gets further expansions. I'm going to give him a 6. Arbitrary 6. Moving on to Warrior. Death's Bite. 4 mana, 4/2, Death Rattle, deal 1 damage to all minions. Again, this is a card that truly is in the same boat as Dark Cultist. It's a good card. It doesn't do anything too flashy, it's just simply a 4/2 weapon that has a built-in whirlwind, but that means some cool things. You can kill a Yeti with it. You can kill Loatheb with it. You can trigger all of your different enrages and, you know, Throbbing Berserkers and things like that with this card. It has uses, and I think its uses are very strong, and Death's Bite is I'm not sure it's a must in every Warrior deck. I'm sure there's some variants that go, Death Bite's not really my thing, but I think like 90% of Warrior decks should be running Death's Bite. It's better than Arcanite Reaper in many decks. It gives you a lot more control than some of the other Naxx cards. I think it's the Naxx card that gives you the most board control, really, because you think about the other Naxx class cards, like none of them really scream, I'm suddenly gonna have board control. Even the Druid card, which is a board wipe, still leaves your opponents with 2/2s. So, honestly, I think this is the best control card to come out of Naxx for class-specific cards. And I'd put it right up there with Dark Cultist, and I'm going to give it whatever arbitrary number I gave Dark Cultist. I don't remember that number at this time, but that's the number I'm giving Death's Bite. And on to the neutrals. Okay. So neutrals, we're going to start off with The Undertaker! Sorry, had to, wrestling fan. Anyways, he's a 1/1/2, and he has the effect, whenever you summon a minion with Death Rattle, gain +1/+1. A lot of people are worried about this card. A lot of people are worried this card would get silly. And it can. This card can definitely reach a point where you just start crying. I had a game earlier where my opponent had a 7/8 Undertaker. Like, that's scary. When you can't deal with this card early on, it just grows exponentially so fast in so many decks. However, I found in a lot of situations, if you know you're facing the kind of deck that's likely to have Undertaker, just try to keep a cheap removal spell in your hand, because if you want to clear Undertaker as fast as possible before it starts getting too bad. I don't think it's as good as people were saying, because Undertaker simply is just a 1/2 when he first hits the field, and unless you can like coin and then drop a Leper Gnome or Zombie Chow or some other 1-drop Death Rattle like Web Spinner, you aren't going to have that much beef. You have 2 health. That's really easy to get rid of in many classes. Shamans can Lightning Bolt you, Rogues can backstab you, Mages can Frostbolt you. There's a lot of ways in many different classes to deal with an Undertaker early on. And so if you just try to make sure you have those cards available when Undertaker enters the field, you should be good. He's also a terrible draw if it's not turn 1. Like, to see him late game is probably the worst thing ever. It's also really annoying when I try playing Undertaker decks, and all of my opponents seem to get Undertaker on turn 1, and I just never see him in my mulligans. Never. But Undertaker, I definitely think, isn't as good as people were originally thinking, but he is a good card in most cases, just not in the late game. I think that specifically can be a huge issue. The fact that you don't have... The fact that he's so bad in the late game, and that he really doesn't have any way to easily scale up in the late game, unlike a card like... I wouldn't say Secret Keeper is better than him. They're definitely comparable in specific decks. But I do think Undertaker, a lot of people were giving him like 10s and stuff when he first was shown. Now, I'm definitely giving Undertaker probably something closer to... I'd say he's a 7. He can do big things, but he's no 10. He's no, this changes the game completely. Next up, Zombie Chow. I always click the wrong button. Zombie Chow. It's a 1/2/3 with Death Rattle, restore 5 health to the enemy hero. Okay. This card has its uses, and it's been seeing some play in some decks. I think that's the best way to put it. It's definitely not the best card for aggro, because heal your opponent 5 health. That's really helpful. I've had many games where my opponent has Zombie Chow. I'm like, oh, I really need that 5 health. Thank you. Yeah, you pretty much have to attack with Zombie Chow 3 times for it to get value. Like 3 direct attacks for it to do 1 damage. Here's my thoughts on Zombie Chow, I guess. I want to like the card, but the only uses I've really seen for the card is it can be helpful in controlling aggro, but it can also be very potentially silly in a priest deck. Priest can do silly things with Zombie Chow. You have there's a video out there of a guy bringing out 2 Zombie Chows and Arcani Soul Priest of healing while he has Baron Rivendare on the field, and it just leads to 20 damage to the opponent's face. Such a silly combo. And I think that's one of the stronger decks for Zombie Chow. I think Priest definitely likes Zombie Chow because even in the late game, you can still combine it with a Soul Priest to get value out of it, despite your opponent not being good in the late game. That's what you're seeing with a lot, actually. The early drops, I think, in Nax is the whole... They're really, really good in the early game. Like, superb. But when you get to the late game, it's like... Ugh. You don't want to see a Zombie Chow when your opponent is at, like, 10 health. You want to just whittle down that last 10. You don't want to put them back to 15. Yeah, I'm just thinking arbitrary numbers here. I'd say Zombie Chow, in my opinion, is around the same place as Undertaker. Probably a little bit lower. I'll give Zombie Chow a 6. Echoing Ooze. 2-drop, 1/2. Battlecry. Summon an exact copy of this minion at the end of the turn. So I played around with this guy in Paladin. Just because Echoing Blessing of Ooze. On turn 6, you have 2 5/6s. That just seems good on paper. And I think it is good on paper. However, the problem I was having specifically wasn't in that deck. Wasn't specifically. It was just simply I couldn't find a good way to end the game. I think this is a good card. It's very similar to the next card on the list, the Haunted Creeper, when it comes to what it does. Even if you don't buff Echoing Ooze, it's still 2 1/2s, which is just 1 attack off from what the Haunted Creeper gives you when it has its Death Rattle triggered. It gives you basically 2/2 worth of points as a Death Rattle. Echoing Ooze on its own obviously isn't the best play. You want to try to give it buffs because it will copy the buffs over, so you can give it Blessing of Kings, give it Mark of the Wild, give it bonus health with a Priest card maybe. It's not as scary as a lot of people were thinking because at first they thought their wording meant that everyone would, every time you brought out an ooze, it would replicate and just keep replicating. But when you really look closely, it's like, wait a second, this is a battle cry, meaning it will only happen when the creature is summoned. And it makes the card obviously worse than that, but it also makes it playable. Because if it was just constantly replicating, that would be a scary card, and that would be incredibly powerful. That would be just ridiculously strong. Up next is the Haunted Creeper. My grade for echoing it was my arbitrary number is I would give it a 5. I don't think it's game breaking. I think it's strong in very specific situations, but it's not quite as good as Haunted Creeper in other situations. Speaking of Haunted Creeper, 2-drop, 1/2, Death Rattle, summon 2 1/1s. This is a beast, however the 1/1s aren't beasts because they're spectral spiders, they aren't real spiders. This card's been seeing a lot of play. When I first saw this card, this was one of my most underwhelmed cards about Nax, because it was like, it's just a worse Harvest Golem. That's how I looked at it. And in many ways it is. However, in many ways it's better. It summons 2 creatures, so there's some Neck Juggler play you can do with it. It's a beast, meaning there's some Hunter play you can do with it. It's a 1/2, which means it has more health and attack, and that tends to be a good thing in Hearthstone. A lot of good cards are cards that have more health and attack, just simply because it means they're going to last longer, and it serves a very similar purpose to Nubian Egg in that it's anti-AoE. Oh, you cleared my board? Well, you've just put 1 additional damage on my board total, rather than remove the damage. It's a good card. I think it's starting to fall under that Dark Cultist, section of my random numbers, where it's a good card. It doesn't do anything too special, just simply, it's a mechanic we see with a lot of cards, just simply Death Rattle summon other things. But it's a strong, I don't like AoE, so please don't AoE card. A lot of Shamans are running it for that reason. I personally don't like it in the current build of Shaman that I've been running, but I know there are builds that like it, and I don't know, it's a good card, in my opinion. Again, going to give it the same arbitrary random number as whatever I did Dark Cultist, because I still don't remember what I gave the Dark Cultist. I think I gave him like a 7 or something, I don't know. Next up, Mad Scientist. He's a 2/2 for 2 with Death Rattle, put a secret from your deck to the battlefield. Yeah, this card's good. This card's good. He plays a card for free, which is always a good thing. And as stat-wise, he's a 2/2. Like, that's not terrible. It's gonna take 2 damage to remove him, and he'll be able to chip away as the time goes on. A lot of people are saying that maybe he should be a 2/1, because he has, if anything, a better effect than Loot Hoarder in various, in certain decks. His effect can be considered better than Loot Hoarder, because not only does it draw a card out of your deck, but it also plays it for free. There's the Reynad's Hunter deck that was going around. Reynad's, right? Yeah, Reynad's Hunter deck that really loves to abuse Mad Scientists, get those explosive traps and those freezing traps out of your deck onto the field, and ready to deal with whatever situation you're in. Mad Scientist is definitely a good card, and again, it's one of those cards where the more cards that come out, the better it gets. If we see a lot of new secrets come out over the next couple sets, suddenly this card's even better, because it has new cards to grab, and they might be really good cards to grab. It's for these reasons, and more, that I will give Mad Scientist the arbitrary number of a 7. Sorry, just doing these videos. It's been a while, need some water. So moving on, we got Nerubian Weblord. There's not much to say about Nerubian Weblord. 2/1/4 is good stats. Warrior is best known for running those 2/1/4s with the Armor Smith. Minis with Battlecry cost 2 more. A lot of people, when they first saw this card, was like, and Leroy is dead. And true, Leroy does die to this in the sense that he's now a 6-drop, so you can't do the Shadow Step shenanigans. But Loatheb accomplishes the same thing, because Loatheb just says, well, now you can't Shadow Step, and Shadow Step costs 5 more now. Weblord, he has its place. I'm saying that about a lot of cards. A lot of cards I feel in this set are pretty situational. He has his place, and I don't think it's in the current meta. He's just If he was a 2-3 for 2, I think he'd actually be a little bit better. It's nice for him to be tanky because you want his battle cry effect to last longer, but it'd also be nice if we could do some trading a little more efficiently with the kind of decks that like to spam battle cries, such as Zoo. I'm just going to give him an arbitrary number of 6. Maybe 5. I'm not sure. The problem I have with him is he has potential. It's just not good right now. Nerubian Egg. Another great card that's been seeing a lot of play. 0/2/2. Death Rattle, summon a 4/4 Nerubian. So, when you have a card that says, if this dies, I become stronger, that's really annoying. It serves the same purpose as the Haunted Creeper in the sense that if you AoE me, you're actually adding damage to the field rather than removing damage from the field. It sees a lot of play in a lot of decks. It's hard to argue it's a bad card. I personally don't run a lot of decks that really use Nerubian Egg right now. I've been running a lot of decks that kind of skirt away from the egg. But it's good in Zoo, it's good in some variants of Giants, it's good in some variants of Priest, it's good in a lot of different decks. Just because it protects you from AoE, and it also can lead to an early game 4/4. And 4/4 is nothing to sneeze at. It's the good old 4 attack that priests hate, and 4 health is, it's out of lightning bolt range. You're going to need some spell power. It's out of frostbolt range. If you're playing warlock, yeah, you can soulfire it or you can shadow bolt it, but 4 health, pretty decent, especially for a card that just happens to come out when a 2-drop dies. Unstable Ghoul. Unstable Ghoul has Taunt, Death Rattle, deal 1 damage to all minions, and is a 1/3 for 2. I've been saying this not quite as much as some of the other Naxx cards, but it has its place. A lot of Control Warriors run it just because they like the whirlwind effects. They are very useful for them. And it also serves as a little bit of a taunt. This thing is going to eat any 3/2. Any 3/2 that attacks it will die. Simple enough. Any 2 health minion that attacks this card will die. It serves a very similar... in my opinion, it's a better Tauren Chief, the Tauren Berserker. I can't remember the specific name because no one ever plays that. But the 2/3 for 3 taunt that has Enrage. This card is in many ways better than that card because it's only 2-drop. It's a 1/3, but it still does take care of 3/2 creatures pretty well, and it will deal 1 damage to everything else too. So it's not bad at all. I'd say this is a 6/7. Can't remember if I gave Nerubian Egg an arbitrary number. I really, at this point, don't expect too many numbers, because again, those numbers are really arbitrary, right? I'm telling you what I feel about the card. Doesn't matter if I call it a 10, a 12, a 3, a 2. Not really. The main purpose here is, you're getting to hear my perspective of these cards from playing them. Dancing Swords. 3-drop, 4/4, Death Rattle, your opponent draws a card. So Dancing Swords is bad in pretty much every situation, but it has its uses. And that's Naxx in a nutshell. It's bad in a lot of situations, but it has its uses. Death Rattle, your opponent draws a card, can be a huge negative, because it's giving your opponent so much tempo, but it can also be a positive. If you're playing a mill deck, there you go, 1 less card in your opponent's deck. And of course, mill isn't the strongest right now. They have a few more cards from Naxx, but they don't have all the cards in the world. But this card will be used in those decks, I can guarantee you, as we get more cards that let you remove cards from your opponent's deck in one manner or another. Dancing Sword's going to see play, I can guarantee you, in those decks. Even so, it's a 4/4 for 3. Like I said, that Rogue deck where I've just stacked all those negative abilities, yeah, it could work. It could honestly work. Just a 4/4 body can be threatening sometimes. And if you just want a little bit beef in your early game, you might run a Dancing Swords. Granted, many people consider a Harvest Golem better than Dancing Swords, and I can't really blame them for thinking that, but, you know, maybe you're just more looking to have the 4 damage right away, not have it split between 2 creatures. Moving on, Deathlord. 3-drop, 2/8. Taunt, Death Rattle, your opponent puts a minion from their deck into the battlefield. So this guy is interesting. He's 2/8, which means your opponent's probably going to have to put some resources into killing it unless there's something like Hunter or they have a direct removal spell. And therein lies the problem. A lot of classes do have direct removal. And for many classes, they can find a way to kill it decently easily. It's a great card against Zoo. It's a godly card against Zoo. 8 health is really hard for them to get through, and you don't care if they get another minion on their field. They're Zoo. They're going to do that anyways. Their minions are pretty wimpy anyways. But against other decks, I've had so much fun playing against Deathlords. Playing with my Shaman deck against a Mage. I realized he has Mirror Entity, so I summon Baron Rivendare. He gets his Baron Rivendare. He had a Deathlord on the field. I proceed to kill the Deathlord and get 2 minions from my deck onto the field. Like, granted, that was a silly little thing, but even so, just getting simply 1 minion, I kill Deathlord. I get an Earth Elemental. Well, that's nice. It basically just gave me 7 mana for free. Or, sorry, 8 mana for free. You might have to use a lot of cards to get rid of a Deathlord, because it's an 8 health minion, and it can be tough to remove. But it can also really, really screw over your opponent, because it's similar to Dancing Swords in that it's a 1-card tempo swing. It's going to take, if you can effectively trade with it without losing too much, you're going to do fine against Deathlord. Is it a bad card? In most cases, yes. Against Zoo and aggro decks? No. So that kind of puts it in a similar position to Poison Siege for me, where I feel like if you could sideboard, this would be an amazing card. But in the current situation, I don't think it's not good for the ladder, unless the ladder is almost only aggro decks. Because the last thing you want is for a Druid to get their creatures out on the board for free, when the last thing you want is just to see a rag appear on the field, because that's never fun. Shade of Naxxramas. It's a 2/2 for 3 stealth. At the start of your turn, gain +1/+1. So this has some uses. The main issue a lot of people have with it is its cost. It's like, if this was a 2-drop, it'd be so much better. But being a 3-drop, there's already so many good 3-drops that, do you really want a 3/3 with stealth? It'll become 4/4 with stealth, but by then the curve, it gets so strong. It's a card that's like, you either play on curve, and the later you play it, the worse it is. It's another card that's better in the early game than it is in the late game. Because the more turns you get this guy just sitting there stealthed up, the more ridiculous it can get. It's a mini Groll. There could be some silliness with a deck that is Shades of Naxxramas and Groll, and cards to just like a freeze mage, just to stall out the game as long as possible. But I don't think it's the best card competitively right now. It's outclassed by so many other 3-drops, and with only 30 cards to put in a deck, I'm not sure why you'd put this in over a Harvest Golem, for instance. Or if you do want a 3/3, why not put in a Farseer? That 3 health is so much more useful. Stone Skin Gargoyle is bad. It's a 1/4 for 3 without start of a turn, restore this minion full health. 1/4 is really, like I said, it was annoying sets on a 2-drop. This is a 3-drop. Ugh. It's just, you don't want that. You'd rather have more, like I mentioned earlier, having more health and attack is good, but this is the extreme of that. This is where you have too much more health and attack, and because of that, you really can't do much with this card. it has some gimmicky potential for priest decks and for paladin decks and just buffing him up. But if you want a gimmicky card for buffing, Echoing Ooze is way better. I really don't like Stone Sand Gargoyle at all. Baron Rivendare. 4-drop, 1/7. Your minions trigger their death rattles twice. So, Baron's good if you're running a deck that involves death rattle, and obviously. I think the reason Baron, in my opinion, is so good is because he's so bad. He's a 1/7 for 4. He's a Mogoshan Warden that doesn't have taunt. Your opponent sees a Baron Rivendare, and even if they look at Dare and go, that could be a threatening card, but they always have that, but I don't think I can deal 7 damage. Like, having 7 health, this is a case. This is one of those cases where I'd say going to the extreme of health to attack is very useful for a card. To have 7 health means it's going to be challenging for an opponent to just clear this with damage. They're going to have to use a removal on this or a silence on this if they don't want his whole your minions trigger their death rattles twice effect to be on the board. And in many decks, if that would run this, if they use the silence or removal on this, you have bigger and badder creatures that will be just so thankful that their road is clear for entry. Yeah, it's a good card. You can do tons of shenanigans with it too, and I think that's one of the best things. It is definitely a shenanigan card. You know, I play Baron Rivendare you've seen the videos. There are people who've I've attacked with Leroy 5 times in 1 turn because Baron Rivendare and Reincarnate. You can do silly things with Baron. I think he's another good let's let the players do stupid things kind of card. He's silly. He lets you do things that just shouldn't be possible. Because of him, you know, those big combos with Carrot stuff that I was talking about using Reincarnate for, they become even scarier. They become possible to do even without the full Reincarnate Ancestral Spirit. You could just Reincarnate. I'd say Baron Rivendare definitely gets my seal of approval. However, I will say, he's not good in every deck. You know, it's for very specific decks that like to abuse death rattles. I think it's good in Shaman, and then I think as you get away from Shaman, I think it's decent in Priest, especially if you're running Inner Fire and can turn this guy into a 7/7 on top of his effect. However, I don't think he's that good in other decks. Even like a Death Rattle aggro deck, a lot of times Death Rattles are negative, and you run them just to buff an Undertaker, and maybe provide, you know, run like a Death Lord for a little bit of a wall. Baron's not going to be really useful there. Yeah, those are my opinions on Baron. Up next is Wailing Soul. It's a 3/5 for 4 with Battlecry, silence your other minions. I just love the thought of this card. Like, silence your other minions. First of all, Freeze Mage. It's a good counter card for Freeze Mage. Freeze Mage becomes really popular ever again. This card will help kind of quell that by the simple fact that you can unfreeze your creatures. Granted, you'll lose any buffs they have, but they will be able to attack that turn. And that can be the difference between winning and losing against a Freeze Mage. In general, I just think it's a cool card. I think it's a interesting thing to see. You can make some gimmick decks with it. You run, you know, Ancient Watchers and Dancing Swords and other cards that just have negative effects. Things like the Beast, the 6-drop Giant Corehound. Such a silly card, and I think I like that Wailing Soul exists. It's really not doing anything right now, but I really like that it exists, and I want to do something silly with it in the upcoming sets. Now we're on to Fugan. He's the 4/7 for 5 Death Rattle. If Stalag has also died this game, summon Thaddeus. And then we'll also take a look at Stalag, since they kind of go together. And if Fugan dies this game, summon Thaddeus. For those who don't know, Thaddeus is a 11/11, just flat 11/11. So These cards are weird. It's really hard for me to judge Stalag and Fugan, just because Stalag's a 7-4, which is but Fugan's a 4-7, which is like 4-7's pretty good. 4-7 definitely has its place in the meta. I think it would have had a better place before Naxx, because Naxx did add a lot of 5-drops, a lot of good 5-drops. There are people who've been playing with them. I think the problem with Thaddeus is that he's just an 11-11. Like, yeah, that's huge. But he doesn't do anything special. He doesn't have some awesome effect. He doesn't, Jiraxis himself. He's just Thaddeus. And he can easily be removed with a big game hunter, with a Shadow Word Death, with literally any kill card. He can be hexed, he can be polymorphed. And I think for that reason, these duos aren't as good. However, they could lead to a silly meta where if you have both Stalag and Fugan being ran in both players' decks, you could just end up summoning like 3 Thaddeus in a game and just laugh as you have that many Thaddeus. Like, putting these guys in a mage deck with duplicate, that can be silly. That can be silly. So, up next is Loatheb. Loatheb is probably one of the most played cards out of Naxx, right up there with like Haunted Creeper and Egg, Nubian Egg. Loatheb has a 5/5/5 with Battlecry, enemy spells cost 5 more next turn. So this guy really likes the number 5. And you know what? He's good at the number 5. For a 5-drop being 5/5 is like Round Curve. That's Stranglethorn Tiger. And to have Battlecry and these spells cost 5 more next turn just shuts down most players next turn. They can only play creatures that turn. They cannot use any spells. That could mean a lot of wasted mana, either from paying 5 extra to use a spell, or not being able to use mana when you're playing a creature. It really is a great card for just slowing down the opponent and making sure that your big creatures on the field can't be killed off with like a kill spell. Loatheb's good. It's a good card, and a lot of people are running it, and I don't blame them. It lets you do some really strong things. Up next is Sludge. Okay, up next is Spectral Knight, because my mouse wanted to click Spectral Knight. 5-drop, 4/6, and it can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. It's a 4/6 fairy dragon. Do I need to say more? Like, that's good. This guy, I'd say I wouldn't say much about Arena, but this guy's a pick in Arena. Like, you see him, you pick him. Doesn't matter what he's up against. Because in Arena, with so much board control, like being the kind of minion-based board control being the real feel of Arena right now, Spectral Knight just says, hey, you really gotta use minions to control me, because you can't use spells. He's a good card. Even in Constructed, like, this guy just looks at Priest and just starts laughing. He has 4 health, even if he could be targeted by spells, so even if they, like, owl him, he still has 4 health, 6 attack. Like, it can be so annoying to remove a Spectral Knight off the field. Yeah, having to get through 6 health without being able to use spells or hero powers. Not a lot of decks really can easily do that without trading a lot, especially since he has 4 attack. Honestly, Spectral Knight is just one of the most solid cards in the set. Sludge Belcher, the card I wanted to go for. He's a 3/5, 4/5 with Taunt, Death Rattle, summon a 1/2 slime with Taunt. Is he good? Yes. Why? Not many people can figure that out. It seems like the big thing with Sludge Belcher is like, people just go, oh, he's just Ascension with a Footman. And people are like, well, no, not really. He's more than that. Well, what exactly does he do that's more than that? Well, he just... It's like his presence alone is just really scary. Like, for 1 minute more, you're getting that Footman. And the fact that he will summon that Footman when he dies has saved me so many games. Sure, it's only a 1/2, but that's going to block an attack. And it will have to block at least a 2 damage attack. And since a lot of people aren't running two attack creatures, you know, at least in the current part of space the meta's in, they're probably going to use a 3 attack, and so he absorbs 3 attack, or maybe even 4 attack in some situations. I think Sludge Belcher is really strong just simply because he can absorb multiple hits. Even if they like fireball him to get him off the field, they're still gonna have to do another 2 damage, and he wastes cards of the opponent. I think that's one of the greatest strengths of him, the fact that he just forces your opponent to have to use these cards they likely did not want to use. Up next is my Naxxramas. It's a giant spider. It's really just a giant Emperor's Cobra. It's an Emperor's Cobra for 3 more mana, and it gains a total of 5 more health for 3 more mana. A lot of people were saying when it first came out, oh, well, let's run this in Hunter's decks, give him a Houndmaster, and now what's your opponent going to do? And I will admit, there are times when I run from my Naxxramas in a random deck, I'm just like, I have no way to efficiently clear that. This is really annoying. But most of the time, my Naxxramas just, like, why would you run a Naxxramas when you have, like, an Ogre? An Ogre is a 6/8. It's going to basically accomplish the same thing of killing anything it touches. There are very few things that won't die to a 6/8. The giants and stuff won't die because they have 8 health. So there is a situation where my Naxxramas is better, but it's just the 2 attack makes it really easy to ignore when it comes to, oh, it hit my face. It's okay. It's 2 damage. I'll just ignore my Naxxramas and move on. And for that reason, my Naxxramas really isn't seeing much play, and I don't blame him. My Naxxramas is definitely not the best card in the set by any means. I think she has uses, especially being basically a Death Touch minion. And we might see more play of her in the future. Again, you never know what could happen in the future with future sets. If we start to see a lot of see some more kind of Death Touch creatures, we could see Naxxramas kind of the leader of a Death Touch deck. But for now, she's just a 2/8 for 6 that could get Houndmastered, but for most cases is just kind of sitting there. And finally, the final card of the next set, Kel'Thuzad himself. An 8-drop 6/8 with at the end of each turn summon all friendly minions that died this turn. So many people called this a win more card when it first was revealed, and after playing with it, I'd say it can definitely be a win more card, but it can also be a win secure card. Like, I've had games where it was like, okay, I might win this game, I'm in a decent position, but I don't have the means of securing the win yet, and then I draw Kel'Thuzad, and now I've secured the win. Now I've put up this situation where my field is just too good, my opponent can't stop me. You know, being able to, as a shaman, go reincarnate Kel'Thuzad, now you have 2 6/8 Kel'Thuzads on the field. 6/8 is great stats. In my opinion, it's better than 8/8, because if it was 8/8, it could be Big Game Huntered. This can't be Big Game Huntered. And it's not a taunt, so it can't, by default, so it can't be Black Knighted. Like, Kel'Thuzad is just good. I love his stats. He's an 8-drop, meaning, you know, he serves a similar purpose, a similar timing purpose to Ragnaros. You know, I think I'm happy as an 8-drop because it means you can combo with him. You can do things like the reincarnate him and then have 2 of him. If he was a 9-drop, I don't think he'd be nearly as good. In my opinion, he'd be a lot worse. But as an 8-drop, Kel'Thuzad, not a bad card at all. I think there are specific decks that run him, obviously. He's not put in every deck. You know, most decks that run Ragnaros will just still keep Ragnaros. But I think decks like Shaman that have these decks like Shaman, and pretty much specifically Shaman and Death Rattle decks are just gonna love this guy. He's not a star card of every single deck like Loetheb is, but he certainly will make an impact if he shows up in your game. He's hard to deal with, being 8 health and 6 attack, and the amount of board pressure he can constantly apply, and the fact that his effect activates at the end of both turns, it becomes near impossible if you have Kel'Thuzad on the field and you already have another like other cards on the field. Your opponent can almost never efficiently trade because they have to first remove Kel'Thuzad before they can even start trading with your other creatures. Yeah, I like Kel'Thuzad. I think he's a great card, and I think he was a worthy legendary of the end of Naxxramas. So with that, that is the entire Naxxramas set. That took way longer than I thought, but you know what? It's a video from me. Shocking, I know. Those were my thoughts on the different Naxxramas cards. I do hope you enjoy. I do hope maybe I brought to light something about a card you didn't quite realize at first looking. I think Naxx definitely did a lot for the game. It only had 30 cards, but these 30 cards have definitely changed how I play Hearthstone. You know, I'm using Web Spinners, I'm using Avenge, I'm using Dark Cultist, I'm using Reincarnate, I'm using Void Caller in some decks, I'm using Deathbite, you know, and the little cards, even though it's only 30 cards, like, it's caused a big change in many decks. I can't wait to see what happens when they release a full-blown expansion set. Like, when we reach the point where we have, you know, 100-card expansion, for instance, or even more, like, that is going to change Hearthstone huge. Because this is a game that seems to very much, with 30-card decks, small changes can really change how a deck runs and really create entire new deck types. You know, Void Caller by himself created a new deck. And that's really incredible. And I can almost guarantee you, when you see a release of 100 new cards or something, or even more in a expansion from Blizzard, a full-blown, you know, new pack, Hearthstone's going to get interesting, and right now it's really interesting just because of Naxx. So like I said, I hope you enjoyed this, my little set review of Naxx. I'm having a great time playing with these cards, and may you guys who play Hearthstone, guys and gals who play Hearthstone, enjoy the new Naxx cards if you have them. I'm having a lot of fun with the set. I definitely recommend picking it up. You know, even if you don't want to use money, save up some gold. There's a lot of good cards in the set that will definitely help up your game, even if you don't have a lot of the other cards. So with that, this is Kython signing off. See you guys.